Welcome to another Star Trek Hangout. I'm your host, Todd Gwynn. Our guest tonight in this episode is Kevin C. Neece, creator of the Undiscovered Country Project, Christian Perspectives on Star Trek. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
Tell us a little bit about the project.
So, the Undiscovered Country Project is something I started a few years back to concentrate on my writing on speaking on Star Trek. I had started to see Star Trek in a new way and evaluate it from a Christian worldview perspective in a bit of a different way than I saw other people doing it. Different kind of levels of engagement and analysis, and it's just something that grew and grew. And I was on Technobabble a little while back, and I was shooting off one of my standard lines I was using at the time, which was, I'm not trying to make Star Trek a Christian thing or trying to make Christianity a Star Trek thing. And one of the guys said, well, actually, I think Christianity could use some Star Trek. could stand being a little more like Star Trek. And I thought, well, yeah, actually that is, one of the big things that I'm saying. So it has a lot to do with what I discover in Star Trek and what value I think Star Trek can hold for a Christian perspective.
Excellent. And I think you're right about that, certainly a lot goes on in the world, and a lot of people can learn from Star Trek, and that I think we all feel that way about Star Trek. So a big part of what you do insofar as content at the Undiscovered Country Project is audio commentary. Tell us about those audio commentaries.
The audio commentary series came around in an interesting way. I work with a guy called Tim Van Orden, who's my first officer. He's kind of my creative right-hand guy, and he helps me kind of construct everything. And we were talking early on, and I was wanting to do a study guide series, and I was wanting to, view the episodes and take notes, and we were going to do that together just to hang out. And he said, well, while we're doing it, why don't we just do audio commentaries? And so we ended up basically our goal is to do every episode of the original series and every episode of Next Generation. And then we're also doing the movies. We've done 2, 3, and 4, the first Abrams film, and we've recorded Into Darkness, but we haven't released it yet, so I'll probably release that later this month. But each of the commentaries is just Tim and I talking and enjoying the episode or whatever it is for what it is. I don't try to impose too much meaning on it if it's not there. We'll discuss it from a philosophical or theological standpoint to the degree that I feel the episode is worth it, and then also we'll just talk regular geek stuff as well, and Tim brings up a lot of trivia and stuff. We have guests, people come on. Tim's wife has been a guest, Beth, and we've had another guy, Martin Boone, who's a contributor for the project, come on and do one with me. We did Mud's Women together. He's a philosopher. I mean, he's a hardcore philosopher. So that's a fun episode. But yeah, we really enjoy it, and we enjoy talking about not just what we read in the episode. We'll try to kind of pick out the theme or the moral idea, what have you. And then, of course, a lot of the episodes have actual, biblical stuff that's in them, biblical content, so it's fun to hang out and enjoy it and do some analysis at the same time, do some discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. I've noticed that the writers have drawn upon a lot of sources, including the Bible.
Yeah.
And absolutely see a lot of that, and Shakespeare, of course, and whatnot.
Yeah.
A lot of Greek influence in there as well. I think we see that repeatedly too. So, about something you do called Holy Week. Tell us about Star Trek Holy Week. What is it, and how did it begin?
Star Trek Holy Week was a bit of a fluke. It just was something I was doing on my own without realizing it. Holy Week is it's what some people call the week leading up to Easter, and so so it ends with Good Friday, and then Easter Sunday. It starts with Palm Sunday and goes to Easter Sunday. And it was Holy Week a couple of years ago, and I hadn't realized it was, but I had this really strong desire to watch Star Trek 2, and so I started watching it, and then afterwards I realized, oh wow, of course I would wanted to watch this because this is where Spock becomes a Christ figure, and of course it makes sense to watch that on Holy Week. And so I started to go ahead and do 3 because that kind of carries on that story, and then I was going to do 4 just to round out the trilogy because I just kind of felt like, well, I got to finish the story. It doesn't really fit the Holy Week thing, but whatever. But then I watched it, and in the context of the other 2 that I've been taking notes about Spock as a Christ figure and everything, I saw 4 in a whole new way, and I was so excited by it. And that ended up with us actually doing the audio commentaries for 2, 3, and 4. And then I went ahead and made it something that I did on the blog the next year, where I encourage people to have their own Star Trek Holy Week, and I talk about, I have a blog post for each one, and then on one day you watch the movie, on the next day you see the commentary, and the next day you watch the movie, and the next day you see the commentary, and you end up with 6 days pretty much filling out Holy Week, and it's kind of a fun. It's not just fun. It's informative. I think you can get a really deep picture of the gospel actually from those 3 films in a really unusual and amazing way that I enjoy. And
so you mentioned Spock as a Christ figure,
yeah.
And you see that he dies, he sacrifices himself to save everybody, and
right.
then in the next movie he's resurrected. So
right.
We're looking at various types of salvation here.
Yeah. And that's really what goes on is you have in the first movie it's very much about Spock's relationship with Kirk, and which is interesting. This Kirk is actually the Gaelic word for church, so it is Spock the Christ and the church, and you see how Kirk starts out. It's very much about mortality and age, and Kirk starts out kind of trapped by death. And he encounters a kind of a new Eden, and Spock sacrifices himself for Kirk, and Kirk he says, I feel young again. He finds the youth, he finds Eden, he finds that new life again. And then in the second film, it goes to kind of more of a communal thing. I talk about 3 and 4, or for 3 particularly, or really the 3 films, but particularly 3, I talk about being kind of scripture jazz. There's a lot of imagery in there. But it's not just really orderly, like this is this. It's kind of scrambled, it's kind of jumbled up, but all the pictures, all the images are there for various parts. The resurrection obviously is there, and there's a lot of cool symbology with that. And then really you see the crew of the Enterprise going to sacrifice everything for Spock. Spock has sacrificed everything for them, now they're sacrificing everything for Spock. So it has a lot to do with risking everything for Christ, and so there's a kind of a communal salvation there. It kind of goes from an individual to a communal, and then in the 4th film, which is the 3rd film of the trilogy, Star Trek 4, then you see Spock bringing the whales back to the Earth and taking away the scar that's left on the Earth from the things that humans have done to ruin it. They've brought about their own destruction. The whole human race is going to be destroyed. The whole creation is going to be destroyed because of the foolish and selfish actions of humans. And Spock comes and makes it like it was never wrong. He sets everything right and he restores all of creation. So that's the sort of picture that we talk about, the biblical story of creation and fall, redemption, and salvation and consummation, and the restoration of all creation. It's right there in Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. I love going through it.
That's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It is.
That's the lightweight version.
Yeah. So one example of religious reference in Star Trek is the Vulcan salute. And here we see a picture of something like that happening. Yes. Now, this was, of course, not so much the writers as it was Leonard Nimoy. Right. Some of our viewers may not be fully aware of the origin of that gesture becoming part of Star Trek legacy. Would you care to enlighten us on the story behind that?
Yeah, this fellow we're looking at right here is obviously not at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention. That's not a Starfleet uniform he's wearing. Leonard Nimoy was coming into an episode called Amok Time. And it's a very famous episode. It's the Ponfar episode where we go to Vulcan and we see Vulcan for the first time. It's the first time we see Vulcans other than Spock. First time we see him interact with other Vulcans. And Leonard has really been, particularly from that episode on, but he's really been sort of the gatekeeper, if you will, the custodian of Vulcan culture. And he's really done a lot as an actor to shape it. And this is one of the first times they did it. He wanted to. There's this actress called Celia Lovsky who's playing the matriarch of the Vulcan society, and they're supposed to greet each other, And Nimoy thought, well, military people salute, Western people shake hands, Asian people bow. There's got to be some way that Spock and the Vulcans greet each other. And as a child, he grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home, and they would go to services, and the Kohanim, who are the priests who are in the bloodline of the original Aaronic priesthood, would come up and they would give this blessing to the congregation. And during this blessing, the Shekinah glory of God is believed to be present in the room. And so, out of respect for that,
Avast virus database has been updated.
They update their Avast virus database.
Right.
Sorry for that. Out of respect for that, and the idea that no human can stand, in the manifest presence of God, everyone in the congregation looks away, And Leonard says, you can't, if you look at God, you'll die. So you look away. To save your life, you look away. But I peeked, and so what he saw was the Kohanim, like this gentleman over here that we're seeing, doing this blessing. And he was just fascinated by it. He thought it was beautiful. They're doing this, they're chanting this prayer, and he thought it was just this beautiful, amazing moment. And when it came time, in a mock time, to say, well, what are we going to do for this greeting? Leonard says, well, suppose Vulcans do this. And that became the Vulcan salute. And there are lots of reasons that hand sign exists, lots of meanings that people talk about added to it. But what Nimoy talks about, what I think is probably the most relevant meaning of it, is that it mirrors the letter Shin in Hebrew, which actually this whole thing together is really the Kohanim gesture, which itself is meant to reflect the letter Shin. If you look at the letter Shin, it's kind of like a W. So this on its own does it as well. So when Spock does this, he's doing a greeting. The letter Shin is the first letter of Shaddai, which is the name of God, El Shaddai. It's also the first letter of Shalom, which is peace. And so this hand sign to Nimoy represents the name of God, and represents a blessing in the name of God, a blessing of peace, which I think is really cool because that's very Star Trek in terms of the blessing of peace. And when you see like Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard doing their salute to one another, the beginning of it is the first person does the salute. They do it together and they say, "Peace and long life." And then the response is the more famous, "Live long and prosper." And peace and long life. There's a guy called Jonathan Gershom. He's a rabbi, and he did a book about Jewish themes in Star Trek. And one of the things that he points out is that there is a traditional Jewish blessing, Alechem Shalom, which is upon you peace, right? Or Shalom Aleichem, whichever way you do. It starts out Shalom Aleichem and then goes Alechem Shalom. So it's peace be upon you, and then upon you peace is the response. So the first part, peace and long life, kind of mirrors that. And then the response is live long and prosper, which isn't exactly the same thing. So I was looking at that, and I saw that John 10:10 is where Jesus says, "I have come that they would have life, live long, and have it more abundantly, prosper." So I thought it was kind of cool that there's this traditional Jewish blessing, peace and long life, or peace be upon you, and then the words of Jesus, essentially live long and prosper, coming together, and it seems to me like a beautiful sort of picture of the relationship between the two faiths and the Jewishness of Jesus, and a little bit of a picture of the Gospels is sort of working its way into a narrative. So
just a Christianity tie-in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's coming from a Jewish perspective initially, but then so did Christianity came from a Jewish perspective initially as well.
Exactly.
So Nimoy's influence lives on, or lives long, let's say, and that goes throughout society today. And I've noticed that the Spock character heavily influences your work at the Undiscovered Country Project. Each year in October, you have a major month-long event that you call Spocktober. Now, how did that come about?
Spocktober happened the first year of the project, which was 2011. That was the year that Leonard Nimoy retired. Now, he didn't actually end up retiring from movies and television. You know, he kept doing more. He's still doing more. I don't think we're ever going to see him get off camera. But he has stopped going to conventions. He Skypes them now, which is really cool. But that October was when he did his last convention appearance. And I was like, man, that's a big event, you know? That's a big event. And we really ought to do something to draw attention to that and to sort of honor Leonard Nimoy, to honor Spock. And so I came up with this idea of doing Spocktober, where we have guest posts, and we have a giveaway as well. And we did it on the first year in 2011, and it went really well. And I enjoyed it a lot, and people really liked it. People came to the Facebook page and everything, and I thought, well, let's just do it again next year. So it's become an annual event. We're on our 4th year, and kind of one of the big centerpieces is there's a fellow by the name of Steve Neal, who is a visual effects and makeup artist. Great artist, great sculptor, fantastic guy. He worked on Ghostbusters, and he also worked on the original Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And the way he got involved in that film was he was friends with a guy called Fred B. Phillips, and a lot of Trekkies might know that name. That's the makeup artist from the original series, who was the first one to sculpt Spock's ears. He designed the Spock ears with Leonard Nimoy for the original series. And when he called Steve over, Fred called Steve over, he said, Steve, you want to recreate these? And he tossed on the table these original foam ears from the original series. And so Steve got to sit down with Fred's original ears and sculpt his version on Leonard Nimoy's live cast, and make the ears that Spock has in much of the motion picture. Some other makeup artists came along later and did some other ones that are also in the movie. But the ones that look most like the original series ears are Steve's ears. And he has those original molds, those original plaster molds that he made from Leonard Nimoy's ears. And he sells, on his website, he sells ears that he makes new off of these molds. So it's the closest thing you can get to a screen-used prop, because those screen-used ears are gone. They've rotted away. And so he makes these in this thicker rubber. It's not what you would use to put onto an actor. They're built to last. He paints them. He signs them. They're great collector's pieces. He sells them for $100, and we get them to give away at Spocktober. He gives us 2 pairs of ears, and we usually just give both pairs away. But this year we're doing the giveaway. We've got a Rafflecopter. It's on our Facebook page, and you go to the Rafflecopter widget and click in there, and you can enter to win the ears that way. But then also, I kind of was thinking about the origins of Spocktober and wanting to tie it back in with Leonard Nimoy a little more. And earlier this year, I believe it was in January, he announced that he is suffering from COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And this is a degenerative lung disease for which there is no cure, and it's the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. And Leonard got it, like most people do, from smoking. But the thing about it is that Leonard quit 30 years ago. He quit smoking 30 years ago. And the thing about COPD is once the damage is done, it's done. And you may not feel sick. You may not know your lungs are dying, but they are. And so when Leonard Nimoy gets into his 80s and his body is more frail, he really starts feeling the effects. So now he has the oxygen treatments and whatever else he has. And so I thought, well, let's do something with Spocktober to sort of draw attention to COPD, and like Leonard has been doing on his Twitter account, try to encourage people to not smoke and to quit smoking if they've started. So we had this idea, again, Tim had the idea, to do this meme contest where you can create a Star Trek or Spock or Leonard Nimoy themed internet meme and take a photo, put a caption on it, and try to spread information about COPD or an anti-smoking kind of theme, that sort of thing. and then you can share it on our Facebook page. You can tweet it at us at UCP Tweets, and then at the end of Spocktober, we will pick a winner, and that winner will also win a pair of Steve Neal's super awesome replica ears. And the cool thing about Spocktober this year is that we're actually, in part because this event is happening kind of toward, this hangout is happening kind of toward the end of October, want people to have a chance to get in on it. We're extending it for another week. So Spocktober actually ends November 8th, which is kind of cool because November is COPD Awareness Month. So we're really going to take that week, that first week of November, and really concentrate on the COPD angle and sharing information about that.
Yeah, that's excellent. First of all, that's an excellent idea, the meme contest to spread awareness. And that's great that people who are watching this now still have a chance to win some of these Spock ears. That's excellent. And I'm sure they appreciate you extending it a week, and it kind of mingles very well with the COPD Awareness Month. So that's just great. So
I think it's cool. I wish I could win them.
Now, after last year's Spocktober, the Undiscovered Country Project took a bit of a hiatus. Why was that?
Well, yeah, I've been a bit busy. I've been working on a book. My book, The Gospel According to Star Trek. There it is. That's the logo I created. That won't necessarily be on the cover of the book, but. So,
what details can you tell us about the book without spoiling it?
Well, the details I can share are that it's coming out in 2016. And we set the publishing date for 2016 because, of course, that's the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And so we really wanted to draw attention to that. And there are going to be a lot of promotional opportunities and stuff that year. I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff. I'm hoping to go to conventions and things like that to promote the book and to speak. And it's going to be coming out in 2016. It's coming through Cascade Books. And it's really been kind of the core of what the whole Undiscovered Country Project has been about. I started the Undiscovered Country Project, well, I started this work really back in 2008. I was working on a paper for a conference, and I was going to write on data, and I ended up seeing all this stuff in Star Trek. I've been away from Star Trek for a long time, and in the interim had what I call a worldview conversion, where I was starting to see things in a whole new way. And I started looking at media differently, looking at culture differently. And when I got back to Star Trek, I just saw it with those lenses on, and I started seeing all this cool stuff. And so the Undiscovered Country Project came out of the fact that as I was writing this paper, I'm like, oh, this is a book. I've got to write this book. This is going to be a book. And I wanted to go ahead and start producing some content, getting some stuff out there, doing some speaking, and getting people interested in what I was doing leading up to the book. And it's been kind of a long road, but I'm excited about it. It really it's really sort of the centerpiece. I think it's really the first book that I'm going to do, the first major book that I'm going to be doing. I hope to do some others. It's the first time I'm really going to be putting. It's the first time Star Trek and Christianity have been put together in this way, in a book form, really ever. There was one book back in 1978 that had a sort of Christian, generally Christian perspective, but it wasn't anywhere near this in depth. Nothing like this has ever been done before. There have been books on Star Trek and religion, and essays that have been done, but nothing like this. So we start out in the book. When you get into it, it's going to talk about Roddenberry's worldview. It's going to talk about his philosophy and also his theology, and I think a lot of misconceptions about him, and what people expect that Roddenberry believed and what he actually seemed to. My contention in the book is that properly understood, Roddenberry was not an atheist, which is something that surprises a lot of people. But I really believe that he is not properly understood as an atheist. Now, he's hardly a monotheist, not a Christian, obviously, not a religious person in any particular way, but definitely held to a form of theism. And that form of theism and that view of the world, growing up in a Baptist home and reacting against the Christian faith that he saw there, but still kind of hoping for the same sort of stuff, really ended up deeply influencing and informing the whole of Star Trek from there on out.
What sort of stuff will you cover in the book itself? And again, without spoiling it for us.
Well, we'll do a lot about, and the challenge with this book has been keeping it down and not writing about everything, because there's so much. That's why we do the audio commentaries, because you can talk about something in every episode. But when we talk about the original series and Next Generation and how different series have dealt directly with religion, with biblical imagery, I'm particularly interested in some of the biblical imagery and the religious language in the original series, because Gene is directly involved with that. And then how that sort of evolved over time. I'll be talking about the Christ figures of Star Trek. We talked earlier about Spock. Spock is a big Christ figure in Star Trek. He's probably the one that gets the most robust, treatment. But Data and Benjamin Sisko also kind of fall into that category. When you put the three together, you get a really, really interesting picture of the different layers. I mean, there's a reason we have 4 Gospels in the Bible. There are a number of different ways to look at and understand Jesus, and those 3 characters do a great job of it. And then
it's unquestionable with Sisko. I mean, there's no question about that one for sure.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where I can't see any evidence whatsoever that anybody involved with Star Trek intends this stuff. I don't see it anywhere that anybody's saying, well, and this obviously, has some religious reference, or, something, even just the slightest hint. I mean, even if you look at stuff about, the Superman films or whatever, people will say, well, yeah, there's the Jesus image. Even if they don't believe in it, they'll acknowledge it's there. I've never seen anybody involved with Star Trek say anything about this. But boy, is it there!
With Sisko, I mean, it's unquestionable with Sisko. I mean, they, he is acting as a prophet and whatnot, and for I can't remember who, but in the later years of Deep Space Nine, there's just no question about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of
Jim Westbrook sitting on our panel tonight tells us it was the Bajorans. Thank you.
The emissary for Bajor, and which being a non-Bajoran, but well, if we talk too much, we'll reveal all kinds of stuff about the series for people who haven't seen it yet. Sure. But it's pretty beautiful. It's pretty cool, and so we'll be talking about that. But that's one angle. We talk. I try to take different approaches, because as I go to this, there are different ways of reading works of art, different forms of criticism. And I kind of come from different angles. So we start with what's called auteur criticism, where I look at the worldview that is behind it. So that's where I talk about Roddenberry. And then we might look at genre criticism. So we look at how the themes of this genre, or the themes that are endemic to this genre, or this work as a genre piece, are then can be analyzed to look at it from that direction. So when we're looking at how it deals with religion and spirituality directly, understanding the genre of science fiction is really important for sort of decoding those conversations. And then there's this sort of appropriation standpoint, which is what we're talking about with the Christ figures, where it's like, this isn't really intended, but boy, do I see it, and this is a great illustration. And and from a theological point of view, I even say, the fact that I find this Christian stuff in this not at all intentionally Christian work of art. I wasn't going looking for this stuff. This stuff came and found me. I wasn't digging. And I started digging once I found it. But but to me that says that and this is a message that I have in all of my work, because Star Trek is just one of the things that I talk about, just one of the things I write on, is that God's at work in everything. He's at work in all of human history. And whether it's some intention that God had in putting this together, or just in me being able to analyze it, it doesn't matter. He's telling his story in all of human history, and this is part of it. It happens in our creative endeavors, and often when we're unaware. But the other thing I want to look at is Star Trek for what it is, which is, I think it's deeply humanistic. I think most people would say that the philosophical core of Star Trek is humanism, which is absolutely right. I mean, Gene was, if nothing else, a humanist, for sure, and perhaps a hedonist too. But he was definitely a humanist. And so But that's where a lot of Christians are going to look at Star Trek and they're going to say, oh, hey, whoa, yeah, we can't watch that, or we can't have anything to do with that because it's humanistic. Or I've heard a lot of Christians kind of bemoan the fact that, oh, wow, I love Star Trek, but I just wish it wasn't so darn humanistic, because I'm a Christian and I'm struggling about whether I should be enjoying this humanistic thing. My argument is that the humanism of Star Trek is actually the thing that makes it most congruent with the gospel, makes it most congruent with Scripture. I think that if there is an undiscovered country in contemporary Christianity, it is perhaps our own humanity. That there's something about the recovering of our human nature that we've lost in the way we understand the gospel and the way we understand God. And I think Star Trek is about what it means to be human. And until we understand what it means to be human, we have no hope of being human to the glory of God, because we're created by God as humans to be humans and not anything else. There's not some, when I talk about creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, consummation, that consummation at the end of all things, and we're living on planet Earth. We're humans. We have bodies. We're people. We're not made to be floaty things that have no feelings and aren't human. Our humanity is who we are, and it's how we reflect God. So for me, talking about Star Trek's humanism, and in fact exploring Star Trek's humanism, has been extraordinary for me in growing my faith and recognizing that the stuff that I was learning that gave me that worldview conversion, that made me start to see my faith and see the world in a whole new way, that's exactly the kind of stuff that Star Trek is talking about. And so it's exciting to me, because if the gospel really is what we say it is, then it ought to fulfill us as human beings. And therefore, when we talk about what it means to be human, we ought to be bumping up against the gospel. And in Star Trek, we definitely are.
Absolutely. So, being human is how we learn.
Yes. Yes.
That's what we do here.
Data said it at the end of an episode called Data's Day. Data says, if being human is more than simply a matter of being born flesh and blood, if it is instead a way of acting, thinking, and feeling, then I am hopeful that I will one day discover my own humanity. Until then, I will continue learning, changing, growing, and trying to become more than what I am. And what Data does in that one statement is he encapsulates everything. This is Ron Moore writing, by the way. Encapsulates everything that Star Trek is about. That's what being human is: learning, changing, growing, and trying to become more than what I am. And he says, I'm trying to discover my own humanity, but by saying he's involved in that process, he's pointing the finger at his humanity and saying that it actually exists and that he has it. He's found it already, doesn't realize it. So anyway,
of course, that makes me think of Picard's speech about a measure of a man, and of course I'll let people look that up for themselves. But that is definitely one of the most powerful speeches in sci-fi.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned you have some other stuff. I'd like to go over that a little bit. First, I want to tell everybody, when it comes out, to get The Gospel According to Star Trek by Kevin C. Neece. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and maybe we'll learn something from it. Now, in addition to the Undiscovered Country Project website, there are some other places people can see your work and other projects in the works. For one, you're a contributing editor at Imaginatio et Ratio. Am I saying that right?
Imaginatio et Ratio, yeah. Which is...
Okay. So what do you do for that site, and is it Star Trek related?
My work has been lately. Imaginatio et Ratio is Latin for imagination and reason, and it's a journal of theology and the arts. And so every issue, we started out doing 2 issues a year. We're now doing 1. It's an academic journal. It's a big, thick volume. We take everything we did in 2 issues before and put it in 1 issue. We release it in the summer. The most recent issue just came out in August. It's our, is it our 5th issue? I think it's our 5th issue. Yes, anyway. And I've been doing so many of them. But the Star Trek stuff that I have been doing in there, I'm a contributing editor, so I edit stuff. I help choose what goes into the journal, and I help do actual editing of the text and stuff like that. But then I also write for the journal, and I've written several pieces. And this most recent issue contains my 3rd piece in a series. We did a couple issues back. I was able to actually take the helm for an issue, and we focused. Which was not, yeah, I think that. Yeah. I'm not a Trekkie, what? But I was actually able to take the helm for an issue, and we did a science fiction and fantasy issue, and that was lots of fun for me because I got to gather together a lot of people who were friends of the project and friends of mine, and people that I've been connected with to write different stuff. And we do, so you'll see in there, you'll see like academic essays, you'll see people doing analysis. You'll see actual art in it. You'll see visual art reproduced there, and you'll see nonfiction, creative nonfiction. You'll see fiction. You'll see poetry, and then you'll also see reviews. And so we try to be a journal that is both discussing art and producing art at the same time. And in that science fiction fantasy issue, I started down this trail of discussing the Borg and zombie lore, and I actually I call it Zombie Trek, and I've just done volume 4 in this most recent issue, and no, I've just done volume 3, and there will be a volume 4. I think volume 4 will probably cap it. Every time I think I'm writing the last volume, it ends up getting bigger and bigger on me, But it's a really interesting thing because I haven't brought in the theology yet. I've been spending so much time discussing the origin of the zombie, where it comes from, how it became popular in our culture, and then I talk about 3 different zombie archetypes, 3 different ways that the zombie has kind of appeared in culture and in art since its inception, and then I talk about the Borg really as sort of a 4th. That sort of takes elements of all these others and puts them together, and honestly takes what we normally think of as a zombie, the horror zombie, the Romero zombie, and sort of restores it to some of what the original Haitian voodoo zombie actually is.
That's what I think about the when you fake someone's death so that you can steal them to make him your slave as a zombie.
That's yes, exactly. It's all about that slavery, and it's all about that control. And which does not exist in the Romero zombie. Yet there's so many elements of the horror zombie in the Borg, and so it kind of it's the Borg actually. People argue like, well, does the Borg count as a zombie or not? And they're using the Romero zombie as their primary archetype. No. You have to go back to Haiti. You have to go back to the original myth, and really the Borg are more worthy of the term zombie than the Romero horror zombie ever is, which actually called ghouls anyway. They weren't even intended to be zombies. That's another story. But and then
they're the undead. That's where that's coming from. Yeah.
And then eventually, I tie this back into why the Borg are specifically a really strong villain for Star Trek, and how they kind of strike at the core of everything Star Trek is about. Because they do worse than obliterate us. They steal our humanity, and the preservation and the growth of our humanity is what Star Trek's all about. And then of course I'm going to go in theological directions on that for sure, because that's what I do. But that series is ongoing in the journal, and I will be actually taking those pieces, sort of compiling them together, and rewriting and editing it a bit, and I'm going to be releasing that on my own. Probably just on my own on Amazon. The book is going to be called Star Trek's Walking Dead, The Borg and Zombies.
When will that come out? When can we see that?
As soon as I can get it done.
Right.
I really have
another book though coming out based on this Spocktober guest posts. Right? There's a whole book of them.
That's a whole other book. So I've got
that one.
Books to finish until I can actually finish the Zombie Trek thing. Probably I'm going to end up finishing up the Zombie Trek series because right after I'm done with the manuscript for the Gospel According to Star Trek next year. So sometime next year, later next year, is when I hope to release Star Trek's Walking Dead. And then, but before
very soon we'll see this Spocktober guest post book. Right?
This is the other thing. This year with Spocktober, I kind of had this idea. Well, we've had these guest posts for 4 years.
Yes.
October, and some of them take more of a religious, spiritual angle. Some of them take more of a philosophical angle. Some of them are just really fun, nerdy stuff. But we've gotten contributions from people like Lisa Lynch from Trek FM, Matt Weflin from Technobabble, Scott Higa of the Christian Nerd, Mickey Haste of Sci-Fi Christian, all these kinds of stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Geeks of Christ. Geeks of Christ is Mickey's project. All these cool people have come and contributed stuff. Renee McKenzie from Thinking Through Christianity is there, and so I'm going to take all of their stuff that they've written. I'm going to add in some stuff that's new, some stuff from me that's new, and we're going to compile this together into a multi-author book that I'm going to start putting together in November. Hopefully, I can release it in November, but at least by December, I'm sure I'll be putting that out. That will be available through Amazon as ebook and print book, and that's going to be fun. I'm excited to put that out.
And just so people understand, this is not just from this Spocktober. This is from every Spocktober ever.
4 years. This is going back to 2011, taking all the guest posts that we've gotten, putting them together, and then there'll be some new stuff in there as well. And so it's a really, I'm excited about it. It's a really cool project. Everybody's on board. It's going to be cool.
Also, Kevin is available for speaking events at your church or your event. You want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love going to speak. It's one of my favorite things. It's because I get to dialogue with people. I always do Q&As at the end, and I always get the most fascinating questions. And I enjoy having the conversation out with other folks. And it's great to go and speak to Trekkies and non-Trekkies alike. I've spoken at conventions, schools, and churches, different things like that. And if you at all feel like you have some kind of geek population, look at having a talk, because it's amazing the level of excitement, because Will Wheaton said something a while back at a convention about what it means to be a geek, and he said it's about the way we love stuff. It's about the way we love what we love. It's not what we're into, it's how we're into it that makes us geeks. And a lot of us who are Christian geeks, we kind of geek out about Jesus and we geek out about Star Trek and whatever, and it's really fun to bring those things together, and so yeah, it's really good. And I speak on other topics as well, Jesus films and Fred Rogers and other kinds of things that when I'm doing a more robust website relaunch in the near future, and there will be more of that available for you to see. But yeah, I love coming and talking to various groups, and I can tailor what I do to what your group is working on, what your group is thinking about. I love to talk to people ahead of time and say, hey, how can I line this up with what you're doing? And always have a great time.
Well, we want to encourage people to get your books and to book you for speaking engagements, and to get in touch with Kevin C. Neece. You can find him on Twitter via @UCPTweets, and on Facebook at /Undiscovered Country Project, and of course through the Undiscovered Country Project website at undiscoveredcountryproject.com, where you can find links to the aforementioned social outlets, as well as his presence on Google Plus and YouTube. I want to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thanks to our guest, Kevin C. Neece.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been great fun.
Thanks to our panel members. Let me just reveal them now, just in case the audience has not seen them. And we have Brandon Cowles, the creator of the Christian Star Trek Fans Facebook group, and of course of the In Memory and Appreciation, I'm saying that wrong. Say it for me, Brandon. The DeForest Kelley group's name?
In memory and honor of DeForest Kelley.
Make sure to join both of those Facebook groups. We have Jim Westbrook with us tonight. We want to thank him for sitting in with us again. And I want to thank all the audience members from now into the future. You can stay in touch with Star Trek Hangouts by visiting us on Facebook, Google Plus, and Twitter. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Star Trek Hangout. Until then, live long and prosper.